Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Centre at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Professor Michael Claskin Johnson, Mr. Gerald Dhanasekara Vedan, Mr. Previn Asoka Vedan, Mr. Sapiwe Mchunu, Mr. Piyush Khandalwal, distinguished guests and online viewers. Namaskar and welcome to the very auspicious program of Buddha Purnima celebrations, with the theme being Exploring Buddha as Light Within. Indeed, to begin our program, I would like to welcome Mr. Gerald Dhanasekara Vedan, who is an attorney and also the president of the KwaZulu-Natal Buddhist Society. Sir is the founder of the J.D. Vedan and Company, and he is a practicing attorney with 35 years of legal experience and rights of appearance in High Court of South Africa. He is a conveyancer, notary, assessor, moderator, as well as a commissioner in the CCMA and the bargaining councils. He has 13 years of experience in conciliation, mediation, and arbitration. Mr. Vedan holds a BA Law and MBA from the University of Durban, Westville, and a Master's of Law in Labor Law from the University of South Africa. Namaste and welcome, Mr. Gerald Dhanasekara Vedan, today for your opening remarks on the occasion of Buddha Purnima.
Honored guests, it is indeed a pleasure to be here. Firstly, I would like to thank the Swami Vivekananda Centre and the Consul General of India for inaugurating such an illustrious event, commemorating the Buddha Purnami celebrations. I greet you in the wonderful name of the Lord Buddha, whose birth, enlightenment, and passing in parinirvana is celebrated on the first full moon day of May. It is indeed very unusual for a person to be born, to have reached enlightenment, to have taught the law, and to have died in the first full moon day of May, which is a very unusual occurrence. I want to just reiterate what Swami Vivekananda has stated on Gautama Buddha. He said, surely he was the greatest man who ever lived. He never drew a breath for himself. Above all, he never claimed worship. He said, Buddha is not a man, but a state. So that fits in with your theme of enlightenment and the light from within. He said, I have found the door. Enter, all of you. We are now meeting in a period of crisis such as unimaginable in the world previously. Not since the 1918 Spanish influenza affected a third of the world's population have we been confronted with a dangerous situation in society, such as the coronavirus. When the Prince Siddhartha left his palace and ventured out, he discovered 4 signs, those of a very old man, broken down by age, of a sick man, of a decaying corpse, and of a dignified hermit. Under the tree, when he eventually found enlightenment and saw that the world is full of suffering, and that suffering is caused by desire, that is, he saw that this desire is not the normal desire that you and I have for a comfortable life, for nourishment, for our basic material wants, but it's a desire for more and more, for destroying the earth, for taking out more minerals than we necessarily need to. All these sort of things prevent us from attaining liberation. And therefore, he proposed the Noble Eightfold Path. Prior to the coronavirus, the world was cruising around in its usual mode. We got happiness here, we got happiness there. Mostly it wasn't happiness because we all live in a state of suffering. I'm sure the professor will agree with me on that point. There's very few moments of happiness we can obtain in this world. There's always war in some country, always something going on in different countries, greed, hatred amongst nations, endless striving after money, power, prestige. while the poor and the hungry languish in the ghettos. However, the virus, which is suffering inflicted upon the world, has taught us that we need to take stock of our lives like the Buddha has proposed. We need to become more interdependent, because one person who has the virus can infect another person who has the virus. Imagine the Buddha, first he went out, he saw the old people. The old people are getting the virus today in the world. That's why they are being vaccinated first of all. Then he saw a sick person. Now imagine if he had come out with his horse today and he had galloped and he saw all the people dying of the coronavirus. How much more sadder would he have been instead of seeing the sight of just one man? And then imagine seeing so many people being burnt on funeral pyres, people struggling, the poor struggling to get their loved ones cremated. And instead we have heard stories about how people are just placed in the river Ganges. This would have shown the veracity of his foresight into the human condition. Yes, Buddha means intelligence. It means awakening the intelligence within one. And that is the theme of our talks here today. That the light, Buddha himself was, the name does not imply a god or a person. The name is a state of enlightenment to which all of us can aspire to. In fact, Buddha said, I am a man, you must just follow me. You've got to experience your own way in the world. Now, but this light that the Buddha emitted started many centuries ago, over 2,600 years ago. And this light has spread throughout Asia. If we go to Asia, we'll find the multitudes who worship the Buddha and cling on to his every word. That is because Buddha's reputation and honor is immaculate. If you go to the internet and Google Buddha quotes, you'll find millions of quotes, and half of them have been comparing it to the real scriptures. They are not really Buddha quotes. Some of them seem to be modern and allude to modern terms. That the reason is that people, if they say that it came from the mouth of Buddha, it's taken as authentic. In fact, there are old books with such quotes in it. So what I'm saying is that even with prestigious institutions such as the United Nations, which was meant to be peacemakers, following upon the League of Nations, mankind is constantly engaging in war. We have no sense of peace and security. There's the all-embracing belief that might is right. We have moved away from ahimsa, non-violence, the creed that the Buddha taught, and the creed that we should all follow. So what I'm saying is that he was indeed a great teacher. His mind was entirely opened, like the fully bloomed lotus flower. We recognize that he attained the light of supreme knowledge and discovered the cause of human suffering. As the light of the rising sun chases away the darkness of the night, and it reveals to us the trees, the fields, the rocks, the seas, the rivers, the animals, men and all things, so the light of knowledge arose in his mind under the Bodhi tree where he sat there, revealing at one glance the cause of human suffering and the way to escape it. I have been on a pilgrimage to India. I've been to the place where Buddha was born. I've been to Lumbini, now in Nepal. I have been to Sarnath. I've been to Kusinarga. And I've been to the holiest of the holiest place, the Mahabodhi temple. And I have seen for myself that there was this real person, this real man. He's not the figment of anyone's imagination. His roots can be traced. He was the Buddha. And this great son of the East, whose message resounds throughout the century, has entered the hearts of millions of people. Now, you can say that the virus, for example, is bad karma for humanity as to what humanity has done, because humanity is absorbed in materialism and worshipping celebrities and so forth. But it's not that. No, it's not that. Sometimes the effects of karma can be mitigated as well. And there are many, many good people out there, many people throughout the world who are good people. It's just that this is something that we as humanity must face with fortitude. Now, hopefully that light within will reach out to other places. Here in South Africa, we do have a Buddhist movement. We do have people practicing Buddhism. For instance, here I have a book which was done in the 1970s in Cape Town. It contains 365 passages from Buddhist scriptures for people to read every day. And there are people that are propagating Buddha all over. So I want to thank the Indian Consulate. I want to thank the Swami Vivekananda Association. And I want to also thank Professor Michael Claskin Johnson for joining us. And also want to thank the other participants. Kevin is here with us as well now to join us. So I want to thank all of you all for your presence here today and for having this wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gerald Vedant, for those very interesting opening remarks on the occasion of Buddha Purnima. We've come to a very interesting part of the program where we'll be interacting with Professor Michael Claskin Johnson, who will be interacting with Mr. Previn Asoka Vedant. And Professor Michael Claskin is a Buddhist scholar based in Pretoria. Just a little bit about Professor Claskin, and here's a researcher and lecturer from the University of South Africa. He's done research and teaching duties for Post of Nature and independent supervision on students, on masters and doctoral levels. We welcome today Professor Michael Claskin Johnson, who is going to be interacting with Mr. Previn Asoka Vedant. Just a little bit about Previnji. Previnji joined the J.D. Vedant Company in March 2018 as an associate attorney. Previnji attained his LLB degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2014 and served his articles of clerkship at the two well-established corporate law firms. He is currently a ward councillor for the eThekwini municipality. So Namaskar, Previnji and Professor Michael Claskin on this interaction on the occasion of Buddha Purnima.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon to everyone, the Consulate General's officers. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Verdant, for those opening remarks. And it's good to see everyone in such good spirits today. Dr. Claskin Johnson, I'm very excited to be able to interview you today. I've been reading up quite a lot about you and following you over the internet as well. So I think to start off with, I wanted to find out, how did you go about studying Buddhism? What started your interest in Buddhism and how did you begin on this journey?
How did I begin on this journey? Well, it was early 80s and I was in my 20s or so and reading a lot, religion, philosophy, as you do when you're young. And then in 1984, I came to the strange conclusion that if this is Buddhism, then I must be some sort of Buddhist. Because this is what I agree with. And yes, here we are, almost 40 years later, and I'm still a Buddhist. hope nobody's going to ask me if I'm a good Buddhist. That would be embarrassing. So 2 years later, I thought, let's take this a step further. And I couldn't go to UCT, also the circumstances weren't right, but I could go to the NISA. Where there happened to be Professor Kruger, who had single-handedly started the study of Buddhism in South Africa. And so, yes, karma. And so after I got my bachelor's degree, he gave me a job and 2 mornings a week. And so after that, honors degree, master's degree, PhD, and now I find myself in an office and there's a plate on the door that says professor. I don't know how it got there, somehow. And yeah, I won't say that all my work has been on Buddhism. So as you move up in academia, you have to do more work in fundamental theory and methodology and so on. But yes, I still write about Buddhism, and I hope to do more of that when I retire in a few years. So that's basically the story. I don't really think I had much of a choice in it. It was whenever I moved away from that path, things started going badly, and whenever I stayed on that path, things went well.
No, thank you so much for that, Professor. Professor, and is it always interesting and enlightening to study Buddha? Do you always find it interesting and enlightening?
Well, the Buddha is one of the greatest people that the human race has produced. Yeah. You don't even have to be a Buddhist to see that. He was, by his own admission, not a god, he was a man, but he was an extraordinary man. Here we are, 26 centuries later, still talking about it. Now, how many other persons from that far back are we still talking about? There are a few. And of course, he lived in a period that was amazing. The German philosopher Karl Jaspers called it the Axial Period, because it's the axis on which history turns. Right. At the same time, you had roughly, within 1,000 years, 500 years either way, you had the Vedic sages in India, you had the Greek philosophers, you had the prophets in Israel, all during this period. That's amazing. But he stands out because a lot of those people you still read about, but they've moved into the background. You don't know much about them. Buddha, we have his whole story. I mean, it's not conveniently in one book that bits and pieces all over the place that you have to put together. But we do have it in broad outlines. And you can actually read about him and find out what kind of person was he before and after enlightenment. So yes, it's a fascinating person to read, to study.
Professor, and what is it that you found to be unique and special in the Buddha's life and philosophy that's kept you intrigued all these years and kept you constantly reading more and writing more?
Writing a doctorate.
And writing a doctorate as well.
Theses.
Well, if you look at him, according to the traditional tale, he was a prince. He was the heir apparent to a kingdom. And he gave that up. Okay, now if you go to the actual history, a little more nuanced. His father was certainly one of the leading citizens, and he was rich, no doubt, but he wasn't a king in the sense of a sole ruler. Nevertheless, it's like if you are born the son of Bill Gates, right, richest man in the world, and you just give all that up, find out what life is really about. And of course, people have done that, but after a few months or a few years, they, hi, Dad, sorry, can I come back? He didn't. Buddha, as he was not yet called, just went on, and he tried everything that was available. Now, he tried learning philosophy. If it was today, he'd probably want to be one of my students. And then he would tell me that, sorry, this is not enough. He tried austerities, but at the time they had this idea that you could starve the body into submission. Then you would find the truth. That didn't work for him. And then he sat down under a tree and he said, well, I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to sit here and do nothing. Nothing at all. Just going to sit. That night he became enlightened. And this is, as every Buddhist will tell you, incredibly good. To sit and do nothing. Do nothing at all. Just see what's out there. And so over the centuries, we have developed these little games. We call them meditation methods. If you can't do nothing, then at least do one thing. Concentrate on the breath, just that one thing. But ultimately, sit there, ignore all distractions, and do nothing. That is Buddha did to become enlightened. That is an amazing feat, which Buddhists have been trying to duplicate ever since. Some of us more successfully than others, and most of us, myself included, are still very much beginners.
Oh. Doctor, with myself being a young person, Professor, with myself being a young person, I often find myself practicing Buddhism in different ways, maybe even meditating as I'm driving, trying to find unique ways to practice Buddhism. So just recently, I was with Dr. Yogi, my father, and we were having a conversation about Buddhism. And we spoke about how when the Buddha turned 29 years old, he began his journey when he left his home, and he began this journey of enlightenment. And in just about a month's time, I'm turning 29 years old myself. So it's something that I'm looking at too. But I think a key question, and also a very controversial question that many young people that are looking at Buddhism have is, do Buddhists believe in a God?
Well, first of all, if you're meditating while driving, please don't close your eyes. Buddha accepted the existence of the Vedic gods, Indra, Varuna, you name them. And according to the scriptures, he had long conversations with them. But Buddhists call the Buddha the teacher of men and gods. Now, in Buddhism, to be a god is a specific outcome of your karma. So if you are very virtuous, noble person over the last 1,000 lives, then you can be reborn as a god. But Buddhist gods have a disadvantage. They're not immortal. After a while, their karma runs out and they are reborn once again as human, or worse. And life as a god is so great, so pleasurable, that there's no real incentive to practice, to look for enlightenment. Now, in the Buddhist understanding, human beings are somewhere in the middle of creation. Not too much pleasure and not too much suffering. So we can actually find a space in which to practice. And so Buddhism doesn't believe in God as other religions do. There are other planes of existence, but that's got nothing to do with Buddhism. They just happen to be there. I mean, there are heavenly worlds, there are hellish worlds, there's the world of animals. All these things are thought to exist in one way or another. Now, more modern Buddhists will cherry pick some texts that seem to indicate that all these things are mental states. So there's a story from Japan. A samurai walked up to a Buddhist monk and said, "Monk, is there a heaven and a hell?" The monk looked at him and he said, "Why should I tell you? You're a stupid fool. You never begin to understand." Now, that's not how you talk to samurais. The samurai drew his sword and said, "I will kill you for disrespecting me." And the monk said, "Yes, and that is hell." Right? So, in certain forms of Buddhism, that this is a Zen story, that kind of thinking has become more prominent, but you can find some verses in the original scriptures that said it was already there. Other Buddhists will say, yes, the physical heavenly worlds, hellish worlds, they actually physically exist. And you can either believe that or not believe it and still be a good Buddhist, because it's not the central issue. Central issue is to find out what's going on in your own mind.
Oh, wow. Thank you for those.
Does that answer your question, or am I digressing too much?
I think you perfectly answered it, and you put it in a way that's very easy to understand, even for someone like myself too. Professor, so the Buddha lived many years ago. And of course, today we live in a very different world where we've had many changes. With our current pressures, with us dealing with the COVID pandemic, with unemployment, with the circumstances that we are under at the moment, do you feel that the Buddha's teachings and Buddhism is still relevant? And does it still play a role, or can it still play a role in inspiring us?
Well, there are 500 million Buddhists in the world, so it does inspire those of us who are in one way or another Buddhists. But yes, just the fact that the human race is capable of producing people like that. And somebody who specifically talked about the reality of suffering. Because normally suffering is not something we like to deal with, like to discuss, or even think about. And so the Buddha put that in the very center of his philosophy. Four Noble Truths. Number one, life is suffering. And you have to think about that word, dukkha. Now, in ancient Sanskrit, if you go far enough back, what does that word actually mean originally? It means a wheel with the axle off center. So it never runs smoothly. It goes boom, boom. And so suffering is a very strong translation. Because even when I'm not physically sick, I don't have COVID, but the fact is that it's out there. And every moment I have to think about it, that, you know, there's people have contracted it in the millions. People have died in the millions. And so every moment it's there. And that also is dukkha, suffering. So it's not just physical pain, it's not even having a fight with your wife or your husband. It's not being sick yourself, but being in a world that is not perfect. So, what are we going to do about that? Well, the one solution is to make that world perfect, and that's the solution that you'll find in the Middle Eastern religions. And if we can't make this world perfect, then we move to the next world, which will. And so the Buddha points out to us that you can try, it doesn't hurt to try, but you're never going to get it. It's impossible. Because dukkha is built into us. Doesn't mean there's no joy, there is. Word for that is sukha, happiness. And, you know, so I get my degrees, I get a job. Now I can buy myself a BMW. Great. And then one day I parked my BMW in the street and somebody took his keys and he went. Now I'm unhappy. I'm suffering because somebody scratched my BMW. Why, says the Buddha? That BMW would have been a scrap of rust in 50 or 100 years anyway. See? So why are you allowing that to make you unhappy? That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have the grease spray. Yes, sure. Yeah, but when something good happens, Buddhism teaches you to say, oh, okay, something good has happened. Something painful happens, Buddhism teaches you, yeah, something painful has happened. Without immediately owning it, without saying, this is happening to me. It's just something that happened. Now, let's see what we can do about it. And so, instead of making the world perfect, you try to make yourself perfect. There's nothing that I, as a person, can do about COVID. Right? I can wear a mask, I can social distance, yes, but I can't wish it away. So I have to learn how to live in a world that has COVID in it. That is what we can get from the Buddha. Don't think you can perfect the world. The world is what it is. It's neither good nor bad, it's just there. What can you do about you?
Professor, and I also find that there's there's a influence on Buddhism on many things nowadays, from our practices to us moving towards being more simplistic, to the minimal style of living, to going to cafes where you see it focuses more on the mind and simple living, to design of things, designs of even buildings. But maybe you can suggest to me what are some ways that we can explore and experience the Buddha, Buddhism, and the lights within?
Okay, when we're talking about light, there's a story about King, I think it was King Bimbisara, who went to see the Buddha, because he's heard that there's this man and he's got a following, but they've never met before. And so he walked down to where the Buddhist monks were, and he looked around and he asked somebody, well, which of these guys is the Buddha? And somebody had to say, well, it's that guy. So on one level, the Buddha was a man. He looked like any other man. But from the beginning, it was said that the Buddha is not just a man, he also carries around the second body. It's like an aura. Right? And that had what is called the 32 marks of the Superman. It's not his physical body, it's this energy field around him. And only spiritually advanced people could see it, or he could choose to let you see it. Okay, make of that as you will. And stories about these auras, the second body, grew over the years. And so when you get, by the time you get to the Lotus Sutra, you get something like this. So I'll just read this to you. The Buddha emitted a light from between his eyebrows, manifesting signs that are rarely seen. The light illumined the eastern direction. 18,000 Buddha lands. One could see how these Buddha lands, adorned with numerous jewels, due to the illumination of Buddha's light. Okay, so what do we make of this as modern human beings? Obviously, as I said, there is a level in which the Buddha is a man. Now, in those days, people didn't understand optics. We know, or at least we think we know, that light comes from the outside into your eyes, and then the signal goes through your brain. But in ancient India, ancient Greece, right into the Middle Ages, everybody thought that light came out of the eyes. Right? And so when they wrote their poetry, this is the image they used. Right? So the Buddha was emitting light. And you have to read that accordingly. So it is their way of saying that because he's emitting light from his entire body, you know, it pervades the universe. Didn't mean that he physically glowed like a light bulb, you know, but they were speaking in the way that they could. So for us, the way for us to understand is that it's a metaphor. The Buddha's light comes from within the Buddha. Okay, but we don't have the Buddha anymore. But it also comes from within each of us. It's there already, inside you. And as I said, it's a metaphor. There is inside each of us a tiny little potential of Buddhahood. Because it's very important in Buddhism to realize that this wasn't a once-off. In the mythology, there were Buddhas before our Buddha. In other sections of it. There are other Buddhas now, they're just on planets very far away. And there will be Buddhas in the future. So it's not just something that happened once, Gautama, and you know, we can just worship him. No, it can happen. We work at it, each one of us. Yeah. You might be the next Buddha. Literally, you. Or me.
I did speak about leaving home at the age of 29, which is next month. Professor,
you know, and yes, that question of leaving home, you know, that is still very strong, of course, in the Theravada countries. You know, the only way to become enlightened is to become a monk. In Mahayana Buddhism, they said, but you know, if I don't want to become a monk, I can't become a monk, then you know, can I do anything more than just you know, give alms to those who are monks? And so Mahayana Buddhism developed more of a ways for lay Buddhists to become involved, to also, maybe you can't get completely enlightened as a lay person, but you can make it a bit easier to become a monk in your next incarnation. And so you find various words for it. Not everybody uses the metaphor of light, but you find terms like Buddha mind, right? So you have your normal mind that you use to go to court and plead on behalf of your client and so on. But there's also the Buddha mind. There's this little part of you that, if developed, will one day, maybe next year, maybe 100 years, maybe in 100 incarnations, be able to develop into a Buddha. And yes, that should be the goal for every one of us. But you know, people always ask me, but what if everybody becomes a Buddhist monk? Human race would die out. Which I can only say, well, it's not very likely to happen in the first place. And if it did die out, well, you know, somewhere it's a big universe, and somewhere there will be opportunities to take another physical form and practice some more. So that's not a question that Buddhists really worry about.
So I wonder how it would be received if, as a lawyer and a ward counselor, one day decide to leave and become a wandering monk. But with that, maybe you can give us younger people, or the newer generation as we call, ways in which we can practice and truly understand Buddhism.
Well, in practice, not that difficult. There are teachers, there are books, there are courses, you know, retreats you can go to. But to understand Buddhism, funny thing about Buddhism is that understanding is central. Because I do not claim to understand Buddhism. If I understood Buddhism, I would be a Buddha. Because that's the center. Now, in Indian philosophy, you've got different paths, margas. So, what the Buddha really did, you know, we like to think of him as unique, but within the context of his time, there were hundreds of these traveling teachers in India. So he took one particular practice, jnana yoga, yoga of knowledge. He said, like, we're going to do that. We're not going to do devotion much. We're not going to do ritual much. This knowledge, understanding, but deep understanding. It's not a question of being able to pass Buddhism 101 at the university. It's that easy. Buddha's rolling off the assembly line. You have to not just understand it as words on a page. You have to feel it in your bones, in your guts, in everything you've got. And but more practical. Dalai Lama was asked, what will it take to become a good Buddhist? He says, well, there are ways to be a good Buddhist. But first, and it's much more important, be a good human being.
Yes.
Now, in Buddhism, we don't believe that people are evil. Some religions will tell you people are evil. No names. But you know which religions I'm talking about. Buddhism believes that people are basically good. And because basically we want to be happy. We want our children to grow up. We want a reasonable life for everybody. As long as they don't bother us, then we won't bother them. So, yes, in Buddhism, goodness is slightly more than in the universe. If it was the other way around, then no Buddha could ever have arisen. But because there's slightly more goodness in human beings than evil, over time, we got a Buddha. And we are, according to all the mythologies, extremely fortunate. Because there are, even according to modern archaeology, human beings were around for 500,000 years before there was a Buddha. And so we have this example, even if it's 26 centuries behind us, we still have it. Vast majority of people who have lived and died have not. Sorry, I'm drifting off the point here. That's professors do that, and unlike advocates and lawyers, we don't have a judge to tell us to get back to the point. So, whether you are young or old, Buddhism consists of three things. Do what is good. Do not do what is evil. And purify the mind. That's all. And you don't have to go into deep philosophical debates like Socrates to find out what exactly is that, what is good, what is evil. We know what is good and evil. We are able to feel it, to see it. Yes, there are gray areas, there are edge cases, but we know good and evil when we see it. We don't need a Buddha to tell us that. We are able to feel that. And the third one is purify the mind. And that is meditation, yes, if you want to put a name to it. But it's also in every situation, wherever you are, when you're not sitting on a cushion. just be aware of what you're doing, what you're thinking. Why am I thinking this? It's a thought that's worth having. So you have to be constantly aware of what's going on in your own mind. Don't think, oh, that's a horrible thought and I must push it away. It's more a question of, okay, that was a thought. Move on. So formal meditation helps with that. Of course it does. But formal meditation is just a way to get that every day, every moment awareness where you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it. So if that answers your question, then whether you are 29 or 92, that is what the Buddha's teaching is for me anyway. If you ask somebody else, you'll get a different answer.
Professor, just a little story. A few months ago, I was having I was at a workshop with a few other people. And a register went around and my name was on that register. Most people, they know me as Previn Burden. Some people use PV, but my full name is Previn Asoka Burden. Of course, my father and mother took the name Asoka from King Asoka. But the person sitting next to me, I don't think he liked me very much at the time. He said, "You'd like to take photos of yourself. You always want to be in the limelight. Your parents named you after Asoka Theatre at Durban University or the UDW. The Durban campus." So I spent about 5 minutes explaining to him who King Asoka was, how I wasn't named after a theater, King Asoka's life story from becoming a very hard ruler to a very kind person. And it was very relevant to the relationship that we had. After that 35 minutes or so, he told me, so King Asoka was named after that theater. So I took it and I really sighed. It took us about 45 more minutes. And I think eventually the message got through. Strangely enough, I was in a very tense situation and he actually came to my defense. So I realized that by sometimes taking time to sit down with people, explain things to them, they're very appreciative. Something that they always remember. But with us as Buddhist people, is there a duty on us to share Buddhism with the world? Do you think that Buddhism is universally applicable? Do you think it's something that all people can believe in, can follow regardless of religion?
Okay, there's quite a few questions in there.
Yeah. You are, Professor.
First of all, do you have a duty to share? I would say no, you don't. In Christianity, there's what's called the Great Commission. Jesus says, "Go and make disciples of all nations." Right? And so Christianity is a missionary religion. Islam has inherited that. Now in Buddhism, there is a section where the Buddha says, "All right, monks, go out, do your monkish things, go out, don't even move in pairs, go each alone, and be back for the rains retreat." And some people have been trying to interpret that as the Buddha's Great Commission. If you look very closely, and this is what my PhD was all about. If you read that very closely, then he was not sending them out as missionaries. He was dismissing them. He was saying, "Okay, you've gone as far as I can take you, and you'll need a refresher course in 6 months' time. So there's now 1,000 monks here, and these people can't feed us anymore. So disperse. I'll see you in 6 months, and we'll talk again. So that there never was a missionary movement as such to convert other people to Buddhism. And there really still isn't. Buddhism spreads because people come into contact with it. They come contact either through books or through meeting people who are Buddhist, and they decide by themselves, yeah, this is it for me. Yeah, good. Where do I join? Well, you don't really have to join. You regard yourself as a Buddhist? Good, you are now a Buddhist. That's always been a very refreshing point for me. If I decide to call myself a Buddhist, then nobody, not the Dalai Lama, not the Grand Abbot of Bangkok, can say, Michelle, you are not a Buddhist. Nobody has that right. They can say, Michelle, you are not a very good Buddhist. I tell myself that quite often. But, so I don't think Buddhism has built into it the idea that you must convert other people to Buddhism. But as the Dalai Lama pointed out, which I referred to earlier, you do have something of a duty to help them be better people. So if your neighbor is a Muslim, help him be a better Muslim. Your neighbor is a Christian, help him be a better Christian. And if by themselves they say, you're a Buddhist, and I'm so impressed, can I join? And you say, okay, you just did. Sorry, there were more questions behind that one. Refresh my memory.
The other was, do you think that Buddhism is universally applicable, regardless of our religion and ethnicity as well?
Well, yes, ethnicity is easy because in the Buddha's own time, he admitted people from all levels of society. Now, the caste system as we know it today didn't exist yet, but the beginnings of it already existed. And Buddha himself was not a Brahmin, he was a Kshatriya, the ruling caste. But yes, he accepted people, laborers, he accepted people who were priests, wherever they came from, whatever they were in their previous life, once they became monks, they were all just monks. So there is no basis in Buddhism to discriminate on ethnicity. There are your actions. It's not where you came from, it's where you're going. Right. Now to say universally applicable regardless of religion, there's a lot of discussion in the academic world and with high-ranking priests, monks, etc., mostly between the more liberal Christians and Buddhists, to some extent between Jews and Buddhists, and not so much with Muslims at the moment. It have been in the past. Those tend to be very academic discussions, but people are trying to see what can different traditions and religions learn from each other. And today you have something called engaged Buddhism, right? So that is a kind of Buddhism that says we must be more active in terms of human rights, in terms of women's rights, LGBT rights, and the environment. It's a very big one. And still be Buddhists. Now, they didn't steal that directly from Christianity, but it might never have happened if there hadn't been contact. So, through the colonial period into the modern period, you have people talking to each other, and there's now a new kind of being a Buddhist that wasn't there before. Now, these engaged Buddhists have dug into their own scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, to find rationalizations for what they were doing. They didn't just grab Christian scripture and say, okay, this is what we're following now. And they realized that it was there, it was just never developed. The same thing is happening in some branches of Christianity. So you have Buddhist monks, mostly from the Zen group, who are going into Catholic monasteries and teaching Catholic monks how to meditate. Because Catholic monks used to meditate back in the Middle Ages. But then life got in the way and other things to do, and they sort of forgot how. And so now they are learning from Zen monks, because they've got the instruction manual, but you need somebody to show you how it fits together, and you need a living example. So yes, Buddhism is active with other religions. Okay, so now in terms of Hinduism, life is a lot more complicated, because if you get into the higher reaches of Buddhist and Hindu philosophy, then it becomes really hard to tell the difference.
Yes.
Which is which. And at the lower level where most of us live, you can tell this one's a Buddhist, that one's a Hindu. But really in the higher philosophy, it's very tricky. And on top of that, of course, at the moment we have political tensions in Asia. More nationalistic kind of Hinduism, and I'm sorry to say, also more nationalistic kinds of Buddhism. I mean, happening in Myanmar/Burma right now is a disgrace. Let's not be shy about saying that. And a little bit back in history, the whole war between Tamils and Sinhalese in Sri Lanka should never have happened. And but it did, and we don't live there, and should, well, we can't just ignore it, but we can't say we know all the details either. But yeah, we had a teacher from Sri Lanka, and he told me what was going on there. They were finding dead bodies outside the ashram. So for a long time, I believe it's a bit more quiet there now, but yeah, so you have political tensions in Asia, which are going to inform and influence the interactions between the religions. And I can assure you that those great teachers of the past, from the Buddha to Vivekananda, would not have wanted that. Now, they would have agreed with the Dalai Lama, be a decent human being, and then be a whatever is.
Thank you so much, Professor. I think you've given us a lot of your wisdom today, and thank you for sharing so much with us. I must also thank the Indian Consulate General of Durban, the officers, for putting together programs like this to still be interactive with our people, even during these trying times. I've been following all of your different series on social media. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for having me on as well. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you so much, Professor Clasquin Johnson and Mr. Previn Asoka Vedan, for that very, very enlightening and deep interaction on this occasion of Buddha Purnima. With that, we've come to the conclusion of this Buddha Purnima celebrations, and I would like to call upon Mr. C.P.M. Chunu from the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Centre at the Consulate General of India in Durban to render this afternoon's vote of thanks.
Namaskar. Greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Centre at the Consulate General of India in Durban, I am so honored today to deliver a vote of thanks on today's program, Buddha Purnima celebrations, with a theme exploring Buddha as a light in. Now allow me to thank our online guest. I will start with Advocate Gerald Danasekera Beden. He is a president of Buddhist Society in KwaZulu-Natal, for the wonderful opening remarks that he rendered this evening. Secondly, I'd like to thank Professor Michael Clasquin Jones, who is a Buddhist scholar in Pretoria. He had a wonderful interaction today about the Buddhism, and the interactions were conducted by Mr. Previn Ashoka Beden. The interactions were very informative. We learned so many good things about Buddhism, and I'd like to say to both of them, Professor Michael Clasquin Jones and Mr. Previn Ashokaji, thank you for the interaction that you had this evening. To Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Centre in Durban, Sristi Harinarayan, Sri Piyush Kandelwal, thank you very much for taking part on today's program. To all our online viewers, we'd like to say thank you very much for taking part on today's program. You are kindly advised to visit our Facebook page so that you'll be updated about all Swami Vivekananda cultural activities. Once again, to all our online guests, Dhanyavad for taking part on today's program. To all of you, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.